Today, there is growing anxiety on the right over the results of a Texas special election that the Wall Street Journal editorial board summed up like this. How does a Republican lose by 14 points in a safe, conservative Texas state Senate seat that President Trump carried by 17 points in 2024? Answer: when there's a voter backlash against the Trump administration. Notably, it's mass deportation debacles. Here's the victor, Democratic Taylor Remnant, a union leader and first-time candidate, talking to MS Now's Joe Scarborough about how he won big in that deep red district.
And a place like Fort Worth, Texas, when you knocked on doors, had people that had voted Republican their whole life decide to vote for you.
To me, it was simple. We had to focus on solutions, not partisan politics. Bringing communities together, that's what it's all about. In Texas, we look out for our neighbors, and that's exactly what we did with this campaign.
Alejandro Serrano is reporter for the Texas Tribune. Julie Roginski is a Democratic strategist and author of the Salty Politics newsletter on Substack. So, Alejandro, what propelled this victory? What can you tell us?
Thank you for having me. I think there's a couple of things on the ground here in Texas that people are still litigating. One is obviously the circumstances surrounding the election. It was on January, Saturday, and right after a cold snap here in Texas that affected campaigning and voting. But also it is the national discourse and the politics that we just heard about at the beginning of the segment, that might this be a response to the president's policies? And also in Tarrant County, there's a lot of local GOP leaders who have angered residents in numerous ways through their socially conservative policies. So that's one of the big questions right now is, was this a response to that?
How much was that part of the conversation? This is not the kind of campaign that gets, big coverage. But when you looked at the ads, and I don't know if they had a debate, what were the conversations like? Where was the tension?
There wasn't any debates, but when you look at the campaigns, you see that they were run very differently. The Republican candidate, Lee Wambsgans, ran a campaign very much around MAGA issues, and Tyler Remnant ran more of a quiet, on-the-ground campaign. And part of that was because he was financially outgunned by a lot. She had millions of dollars in contributions, and she had one contribution from one group that overshadowed all of Remnant's contributions. So I was speaking with his strategist yesterday for a report I had today. They were saying that, they kind of knew that they had to go door to door, people's living rooms, kitchens, and kind of hear their issues. And then those issues ended up dominating his campaign.
So, Julie, even Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, a complainer about MAGA, said this: a swing of this magnitude is not something that can be dismissed. Republicans should be clear-eyed about the political environment heading into the midterms. I mean, that said, Democrats like Beto O'Rourke have been saying for years, Texas is about to turn purple, Texas is about to turn blue. But what does this really tell us?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, any Republican that doubles down on MAGA, and they're expected to because it's a loyalty test and Donald Trump demands that they do, is in trouble this year. I don't care how red your district is. This should be a wake-up call. I mean, this was a very, very, very red district, the reddest county in the country, and it just flipped blue. I mean, what does that say? So
is that a damned if you do and damned if you don't? Because the money comes from the MAGA folks, right?
Well, the money comes from MAGA folks, but more importantly, you can't cross this president without him going negative on you. Look what happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, the woman was beyond loyal to Trump. She stepped out of line on one thing. Done. Look what they're doing all over this place to Susan Collins, who stepped out of line once or twice, and now he's saying she deserves to lose. I mean, consistently, you cannot cross this president without him using his megaphone and the power of the bully pulpit to go after his own party. On the other hand, Texas is going to have not really a blue wave this year. I believe Texas is going to have a brown wave this year. All the Latino voters who voted for Trump in 2024 along the border counties and other places, all of a sudden those people have completely flipped on the president. And what you're going to see is the redistricting that Texas Republicans undertook to make those districts somewhat more Latino because they had to jam those in to make it more Republican. This is going to backfire on them. And if I were Greg Abbott and I were the Republicans in Texas today, I would be seriously thinking about, oh, my God, what did we just do? Because we potentially created a lot more Democratic districts than we anticipated doing.
Alejandro, 3 times in the 48 hours leading up to the race, Donald Trump posted get out the vote messages. But by Sunday afternoon, he claimed to know nothing about the race.
What is your reaction to that?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it. Somebody ran where?
In Texas, a special election for legislative
The 9th state Senate seat.
I'm not involved in that. That's a local Texas race. It's too bad. What can I say? I have nothing to do with it.
Had you been seeing any signs on the ground, or are you seeing signs on the ground that Trump's influence is waning in Texas?
You know, it's really difficult to measure that, but to the point about the importance of Latinos and Latino voters in Texas, we're talking about a county that 1 in 5 eligible voters are Hispanic. You know, some of the early analysis coming out of this election is that Mr. Remick won some neighborhoods and areas that are predominantly Hispanic by more than 50 points than former presidential candidate Harris. I think this is going to be one of the biggest questions heading into November in Texas.
Texas is going to be fascinating. There's no doubt about that. But these campaigns cost a lot of money these days. The numbers never cease to amaze me. Despite the polls and the special elections that would show you Democrats are doing very, very, very well, the money game isn't necessarily so great because the RNC holds a nearly $100 million advantage over the DNC in the latest FEC filings. Does that tell us anything?
No, I mean, they control levers of government. So, of course, donors give to people who might do something for them down the road. And so, of course, you have the Republicans who control everything being able to have an advantage there. Look, I'm a consultant. I love spending money. That's what people like me do. But I don't think money is dispositive this year. You saw that in this election. You see that in other elections coming up. You see that in an election coming up in New Jersey in a couple of days where outside groups are spending enormous amounts of money against the frontrunner, who I still think is going to win. Because voters ultimately, I think, understand what they're voting for this year. They don't need to be convinced by outside groups that Donald Trump is great. They're not going to be convinced that Donald Trump is great. They're not going to be convinced that they can't afford the price of meat. They can't, they can't afford the price of health care. They don't need an outside group telling them, no, let's spend $100 million telling you that things are fine in your life when you know full well they're not. And so money's great to have in a campaign, but not in an environment like this. It is almost impossible to spend an amount of money to tell voters that they're not feeling what they're feeling right now.
Alejandro Serrano and Julie Roginski, thank you both.